vestibular aspects are mainly related to the internal ear, where your organs for sensations, for auditory sensation and for vestibular sensation, they are located inside the internal ear. So that is where we are going to discuss the histology, because that is where your organs for sensations of auditory sense and for balance are there. Anyways, so we'll start with the anatomy of the external and the middle ear. The ear is a sensory organ for hearing, and it maintains the balance and equilibrium. Its components receive, deconstruct, analyze, amplify, transmit, and transduce the pressure waves striking the ear to the tympanic membrane, and convey these electrical impulses from the cochlea to the central nervous system for the perception of the auditory areas in the cerebral cortex as sound. So what is happening is that sound waves are generated. These sound waves are going to be conducted through the external ear. The external ear is going to take it to a membrane which is called the tympanic membrane. The tympanic membrane will vibrate because of these sound waves, and this will result in vibration of these bones inside the middle ear cavity, which are called the ossicles. And when these bones are going to vibrate, they are going to send these vibratory signals to the internal ear. And the internal ear has these organs or sensory organs, which when they are going to be vibrated, the fluid within the internal ear is going to vibrate. That would stimulate these respiratory that would stimulate these receptors on these sensory organs, and as a result a nerve impulse would be generated, and that nerve impulse would be passed on through the eighth cranial nerve, which is the vestibulocochlear. So it has two components: a cochlear nerve which is coming out from the cochlea, which is auditory, and a vestibular nerve coming out from the vestibular apparatus. Both of them together will form the vestibulocochlear nerve, the eighth cranial nerve, and this is going to go to the brainstem. And from the brainstem, we know that there are vestibular pathways and there are cochlear pathways, which are going to transmit this information to the cerebral cortex, where it is going to be analyzed. So we are, at the moment, what we are going to do is we are going to talk about, in this session, the structure of the external ear, and we are going to talk about the anatomy of the middle ear. We will leave the internal ear today for the next session, where we are going to deal with the structure of the internal ear. We would also see how these sound waves which are going to be conducted from the external and middle ear into the internal ear are going to be analyzed, or will stimulate the receptors within the internal ear, and how this is going to be conducted. So we are going to talk about the pathways and the internal ear in the next session. So today's session is mainly targeted towards the external ear. So the ear has three parts. We have the external ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. So we are going to talk today mainly about the external and the middle ear. We are going to leave the inner ear for the next session, where we are going to talk about the receptors, how this sound and how this balance is basically evaluated by the organs which are present in the internal ear, and how the signals are going to be conducted to the cortex. That would be the major objective for the next session. So the function of the auricle, which you see outside, this is the auricle, is to collect sound waves and convey them to the external acoustic meatus. So what you are seeing here in the external ear, there are two parts. One is the auricle, which is this, and the other is this opening which you see. That opening is the external auditory meatus. So you have auricle and the external auditory meatus. This is the external ear. So the function of the auricle is to collect the sound and convey them to the external auditory meatus, which is this hole in your skull. So it goes through the external auditory meatus. At the medial end of the external auditory meatus, there is a membrane, and that membrane is called the tympanic membrane. So The sound waves which are basically accumulated by the auricle, they would travel, they would transduce through the external auditory meatus, and they would reach this membrane which is called the tympanic membrane. So the function of the auricle is to collect sound waves and convey them to the external acoustic meatus. It consists of several parts. There is helix, there is antihelix, so this is helix, and then inside this is the antihelix. You have the tragus, so this bulging which you see here is called the tragus. There is the antitragus, so you have helix, antihelix, you have tragus, antitragus, and you have the concha of the auricle, and you have this part which is non-cartilaginous part. So the upper part is cartilaginous, the lobule is non-cartilaginous. So you usually are going to pierce the lobule, and the piercing is done mainly in this non-cartilaginous part, which is mainly made up of fat. So this is lobule. Then you have the external acoustic meatus, which is the canal which is leading inside the skull cavity. So what you need to understand is that the auricle is mainly formed of a cartilage, and the lowermost part of it is mobile, which is lobule, and that lobule is mainly made up of fat, and it is usually used for piercing. In terms of this cartilage, you might think how this cartilage is attached to the skull. You have a cartilage, there is nothing here, how this is attached to the skull. Because this cartilage is not only here, part of the external acoustic meatus is also made up of this cartilage. So you don't see only this, but it is funneling into the external auditory meatus. So the lateral 1/3 of the external auditory meatus is also made up of cartilage. So you have this cartilage, and then it is going in. So it's like this and a funnel in. So it is about lateral 1/3 of the external auditory meatus is also cartilaginous. The medial 2/3 of the external auditory meatus would be osseous, that means bony. So you have lateral 1/3 of the external auditory meatus cartilaginous, and the medial 2/3 of it is the osseous or bony. So what you are seeing here, this is the external auditory meatus. So you can see the lateral 1/3 is cartilaginous, and this cartilage is not a complete cartilage, it's a C-shaped cartilage. So the upper part is still empty, and that is covered by fibrosis. So you have C-shaped cartilage, and the upper part of the external auditory meatus is covered by fibrous material. Similarly, the bony part is going to make up the medial 2/3 of the external auditory meatus, and this is formed by the tympanic plate of the temporal bone. And tympanic plate of the temporal bone is also C-shaped. The upper part, the roof, is covered by the petrous temporal bone. So the C-shaped inferior part is basically a bone which is the petrous temporal bone. The external ear which you are seeing is also covered by skin. So there is cartilage or bone, where whatever you are looking at, cartilage is outside. On the inner aspect in the external auditory meatus there is bony part also. So it is the skin which is covering that, and the skin is rich in sebaceous gland, it is rich in hair cells and hair glands, and it also has these coiled glands which are called ceremonious glands. And these ceremonious glands, they secrete a thick wax-like material which is called cerumen, and which is wax. The cerumen is wax, and it is released by the ceremonious glands, which are long coiled glands. They are mainly present in the cartilaginous part of the external ear. They are not present in the bony part. So that's why you have wax usually accumulating in the ear, and sometimes you might also have infections because there is skin here. So you can have infections of the external ear, you can have wax accumulating and blocking the external ear. What would be the function of the wax here? Why do you need wax here?
Protection.
Traps.
Yeah. So it traps. It can trap, certain like insects going into your ear. It can also trap water going into the ear because it is wax. So if you don't want your water to go into when you're bathing or doing something, you don't want your ears to be filled with water. So it can stop that. Wax is there. So you can have extra wax and that can block the external auditory meter. So usually, people have the syringing done so that the wax can be removed. Sometimes people try to, put foreign objects into the ear and try to, clean up the wax, but it is dangerous because it can go in deeper and pierce the tympanic membrane. So you don't want this membrane to be pierced, which is the tympanic membrane. So this area is the external ear. This area is the middle ear, and then you can see this area which is the internal ear. And you can see the internal acoustic meatus through which the facial and the vestibulocochlear are related. So this is the internal acoustic meatus into the posterior cranial fossa. This roof which you are seeing is formed by the petrous temporal bone. Now the external ear, you need to know the nerve supply also, because if you have infection you would have pain. So you need to know what are the nerves which are going to supply the external ear. So the other important thing about before we go to the nerves is that if you look at the external acoustic meatus, it's not a very straight canal. It's like a S shape or sinus type of canal. So when you are going to examine the external ear, you are going to pull the ear upward and backward. And this upward and backward pulling of the auricle will make the external auditory meatus straight so that you can observe the tympanic membrane. The main thing which you are observing with an otoscope is to see the tympanic membrane. So you want to see the tympanic membrane, you need to pull the auricle up and backward. That is going to make the external auditory meatus straight. Usually the external auditory meatus is going to be a little bit curvy or sinus, and that's why you need to make it straight, and you pull the ear upward and backward. That is going to make the external auditory meatus straighter.
Give us the name of the cartilage. The name of the cartilage.
This is just a hyaline cartilage.
You said in the external area.
Yeah. The lateral 1/3
Yeah.
is cartilage. The same cartilage which is making the auricle is going in and forming.
This is the cartilage.
Yeah, this is the cartilage. This part, the lateral 1/3, and the medial 2/3 of the canal is bony or osseous, formed by the tympanic plate of the temporal bone. Okay, now what we are going to show you here is the nerve supply. So the nerve supply of the external ear, there you should know that there is a cranial surface of this ear. So this is the cranial surface and this is the lateral surface. So the cranial surface, which is on this side of the ear, is basically supplied by greater auricular nerve. So greater auricular nerve supplies most of the cranial and the medial surface. So cranial and the medial surface of the auricle is supplied by greater auricular nerve, except the upper part of this cranial and medial surface. The upper part of the cranial and medial surface is supplied by the lesser occipital nerve. Most of this lateral surface which you have here, this is the lateral surface of the ear, is supplied by auriculotemporal nerve, which is a branch of mandibular division of trigeminal. Plus, it is the external auditory acoustic meatus is also supplied posteriorly by the branch of the vagus nerve, which is called the Jacob's nerve. So there is a branch of vagus nerve which is supplying the posterior and inferior surface of the external acoustic meatus, and it is also supplying part of the eardrum. So you can see the lower part of the eardrum is also supplied by this vagus branch of the vagus nerve, auricular branch of the vagus nerve, or it sometimes is called Jacob's nerve. The upper part of the external acoustic meatus is mainly supplied by the auriculotemporal, which is supplying the lateral surface of the ear also. And it is going to supply the anterior part of most of the tympanic membrane. So only posterior part of the tympanic membrane is supplied by the auricular branch of vagus. The rest of it is supplied by the auriculotemporal nerve. And some, area within the external auditory meatus is also partially supplied by a branch of the facial nerve. But now look at this, that you have three different nerves which are supplying here. A branch of mandibular division of trigeminal, a branch of vagus, and a branch of facial, and also the greater auricular is also supplying here. So the referred pain from the nerves which are supplying different parts of the pharynx and the tonsils and the tongue can also come to the ears. So one important clinical thing about this nerve supply is that you might have pain because of an inflammation of the tongue, because the lingual nerve is supplying, but because there is this referred pain can travel through the auriculotemporal and this can reach to the ear. Similarly, pharynx is supplied by the vagus nerve, and any inflammation of the pharynx can result in a pain in the ear because of a referred pain. So you need to understand this important issue in terms of the nerve supply. The other important issue which can happen is the cuff syndrome. In young people, if you have inflammation of the external ear, that would stimulate the vagus nerve, and that is going to result in cuff. So the children would come in with an external ear problem, and they would have frequent cough because of the stimulation of the vagus nerve. In elderly patients, it is even much more dangerous, and that's why when you are doing an otoscope or looking through the otoscope into the ear in elderly and children, you need to be careful that you do not stimulate a lot of the vagus nerve, because if you stimulate the vagus nerve in elderly patients, in the external ear, this can lead to syncope also. So because vagus actually supplies the baroreceptors and all that. So you just are doing an otoscope and that can result in syncope, and that should be thought out in elderly patients. And in children it would lead to cough because of stimulation of the vagus nerve. So Jacob's nerve is important in terms of the nerve supply of the external ear. So these are the type of questions you can get in the exam, where somebody would put up a scenario and saying, an ENT specialist was looking into an old guy's ear through an otoscope and suddenly he fell down. Or which nerve do you think is affected? So you need to be vigilant, how we are going to ask. We are not going to ask you, okay, what is the nerve supply of the external ear? Nobody is going to ask this. What people are going to ask you is that you have a patient coming to you, it's 80-year-old, with a pain in the external ear. The physician decided to put up an otoscope into the external ear, and suddenly the patient has a syncope. Which nerve do you think is involved? It's the vagus nerve, because there is a communication of the vagus nerve to the baroreceptors. Okay? So keep yourself vigilant when we are talking about these clinical issues, how you can relate it with the clinical anatomy of the external ear. Okay. The blood supply to the external ear is mainly by either a branch from the posterior auricular nerve, which is called posterior auricular nerve, and also the branches from the superficial temporal nerve, the temporal artery. So posterior auricular artery and the superficial temporal artery, there is also certain a little bit of contribution in the deep part of the external